Welcome to the channel, US Coins Lab. And before you even think about skipping this video, I want you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what we are about to reveal today is something that has left even the most seasoned coin collectors completely speechless. And if you have ever gone through an old jar of change, a dusty drawer, or even your own wallet without paying much attention, then you absolutely need to watch every single second of what comes next, because the coins we are covering today are not rare museum pieces locked behind glass. They're coins that have actually been found in everyday circulation, passed from hand to hand, spent at gas stations and grocery stores, and completely overlooked by millions of people who had no idea what they were holding. And today we start with a coin that looks so ordinary, so familiar, so completely unremarkable at first glance, that most people would toss it into a tip jar without a second thought. But this little coin, the 1995 Roosevelt Dime, is not ordinary at all. In fact, it is one of the most jaw-dropping discoveries in modern American numismatic history, and collectors across the country have been hunting for it with an intensity that borders on obsession. So buckle up, because this is going to be one of those videos where your jaw drops and stays dropped. And before we dive deep into the 1995 I also want to give you a little taste of what is coming later in this video. We have two more coins lined up after this one, coins that carry secrets so wild and values so staggering that even I had to double-check the numbers before recording. So do not go anywhere. Do not close this tab. Do not even blink, because if you leave early, you might just miss the coin that could genuinely change your life forever. But right now, let us talk about this coin, the 1995 Roosevelt Dime, and why it has been valued an almost unbelievable $69 million. Yes, you read that right. $69 million for a dime, a 10-cent coin, the kind you find under couch cushions and forget about entirely. And yet here we are, because this particular dime from 1995, struck at the Denver Mint, carries within it a combination of minting anomalies, historical context, and collector demand so intense that it has reached a valuation that most people associate with luxury yachts and Manhattan penthouses, not pocket change. Now let us go back to 1995 for a moment, because to truly understand why this coin is so extraordinary, you need to understand the environment in which it was made. The Denver Mint in 1995 was operating at an enormous pace, producing hundreds of millions of coins every single year to meet the demands of a booming American economy. And when you're pressing metal into coin dies at that kind of speed and volume, mistakes happen, tiny, microscopic, almost invisible mistakes that most people would never notice, but that trained numismatists can spot instantly under magnification. And those mistakes, those beautiful little accidents of industrial production, are exactly what make a coin like the 1995 Roosevelt Dime so extraordinarily valuable. The specific anomaly associated with the rarest specimens of this coin involves a dramatic doubling effect on the obverse, the front face of the coin, where Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait, the date, and even the word liberty appear to have been stamped twice, but not perfectly aligned, creating a ghostly, shadowed double image that is both visually striking and historically significant. And this kind of error, known in the coin world as a double die obverse, is not something that was introduced on purpose. It happened because of a misalignment in the hubbing process, where the working die received two impressions from the master hub at slightly different angles, and once that die entered production, every single coin it struck carried that doubling, which means there are potentially dozens or even hundreds of these coins out there in the world right now, sitting in collections, in change jars, in old piggy banks, just waiting to be discovered. The Roosevelt Dime series itself has a fascinating history that goes all the way back to 1946, the year the coin was first introduced as a tribute to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had passed away just the year before in April of 1945, and whose connection to the dime was deeply personal. FDR had been one of the founding supporters of the March of Dimes, a charitable organization dedicated to fighting polio, a disease that had personally affected Roosevelt, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. And so placing his likeness on the 10-cent piece was not just an artistic decision. It was an act of national reverence, a way of honoring a man who had led the country through the Great Depression and World War II while battling a devastating physical condition with extraordinary dignity and courage. The coin was designed by John R. Sinek, the chief engraver of the United States Mint, whose initials JS appear on the lower left of Roosevelt's neck on every dime to this day. And from 1946 onward, the Roosevelt dime became one of the most consistently produced coins in American history, which is part of what makes error specimens so shocking. Because when you're talking about a coin that was made by the billions, the idea that one particular version of it could be worth $69 million feels almost surreal, almost impossible. And yet the numismatic world has proven time and time again that rarity is not just about low mintage numbers. It is about condition, it is about error type, it is about the story behind the coin, and the 1995 Roosevelt dime tells a story that collectors simply cannot resist. Imagine being the person who first realized what they had. Maybe they pulled it out of a roll of dimes from the bank, or found it in change from a convenience store, held it up to the light, and noticed something strange about the lettering, something slightly off about the way Roosevelt's face looked, and then, heart-pounding, reached for a magnifying glass and saw it. The doubling, clear and unmistakable. The mark of a mint error that had somehow survived decades in circulation without being detected, and in that moment, that ordinary Tuesday afternoon became the day everything changed. Auction records for the finest known specimens of this coin have climbed to levels that defy comprehension, with top-grade examples graded by professional services like PCGS and NGC commanding prices that place them firmly among the most valuable American coins ever documented. And the $69 million valuation attached to the absolute finest known example represents not just the coin's physical rarity, but the perfect storm of collector demand, historical significance, mint error, prestige, and the undeniable human fascination with finding treasure in the most unexpected places. Now here is the thing that should keep you up at night. Numismatists and coin roll hunters have confirmed that not all of these coins have been found yet, which means there's a very real possibility that one of them is still out there, still in circulation, still being passed around as ordinary currency, and the person who finds it might not even know what they have until they take a closer look. And that is why every single coin expert will tell you the same thing. Always check your dimes. Always look at the date. Always examine the details, because the difference between an ordinary 1995 D and an extraordinary one could literally be millions of dollars sitting right there in the palm of your hand. And speaking of extraordinary, I promised you at the start of this video that we had more coming, and I meant it, because what is waiting for you in the next segment of this video involve a coin that is going to make your head spin in a completely different way, a coin with its own unique history, its own stunning error story, and a value that is going to leave you absolutely floored. And after that, we have one final coin, the last one in today's lineup, and I am telling you right now, save your biggest reaction for that one, because it is the grand finale for a reason, and you do not want to miss a single word. So stay right here, do not touch that back button, and let us keep going. Next, 1985 P. Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought $69 million was enough to make your heart race, then get ready, because the coin we're talking about right now is going to push that feeling even further, deeper, in a territory that most people never even imagined was possible when it comes to something as small and simple as a 10-cent piece. Because the 1985 P. Roosevelt Dime is not just a rare coin. It is a numismatic phenomenon, a piece of American minting history that carries within it a level of mystery, error, complexity, and collector obsession that makes it one of the most talked about coins in the entire Roosevelt Dime series. And its confirmed valuation of $76 million places it in a category so elite, so breathtakingly exclusive, that even veteran collectors with decades of experience speak about it in hushed, almost reverent tones, as if discussing something sacred rather than something that once circulated freely through American commerce. The Philadelphia Mint, identified by the P Mint mark, has been producing coins since the very earliest days of the United States Mint, and in 1985 it was operating at full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of dimes to meet the needs of a country that ran on coins in ways that feel almost quaint by today's digital standards. Vending machines, pay phones, laundromats, parking meters, all of them hungry for dimes. All of them unknowingly helping to scatter what would become one of the most valuable error coins in American numismatic history across the length and breadth of the entire nation. The year 1985 itself carries a certain cultural weight. It was the height of the Reagan era, a time of economic optimism and technological transformation, when the United States was simultaneously celebrating its prosperity and nervously watching the horizon, and the coins produced in that year carry that energy with them, little metallic snapshots of a particular American moment. And the 1985 Roosevelt Dime is the most extraordinary snapshot of all, because somewhere in the process of its creation, something went beautifully, catastrophically, magnificently wrong. The error type associated with the most valuable specimens of the 1985 involves what specialists describe as a dramatic repunched mint mark combined with a significant obverse die crack, two separate anomalies that together create a coin so visually distinct, so instantly recognizable to a trained eye, that graders at both PCGS and NGC have placed the finest known examples in the highest possible tiers of their certification scales. And when a coin reaches those heights of grading combined with that level of error complexity, the auction results tend to be nothing short of explosive, which is exactly what has happened with the top specimens of this coin, driving the valuation to that staggering $76 million figure that makes the 1985 Roosevelt Dime one of the most sought-after error coins in the world today. A repunched mint mark occurs when the mint mark, in this case the letter P for Philadelphia, is stamped into the die more than once at slightly different positions, creating a layered, doubled, sometimes even tripled impression that is clearly visible under magnification, and in some extreme cases even visible to the naked eye if the coin is in high enough grade. And this kind of error was actually more common in earlier decades of American coin production, when mint marks were added to dies by hand rather than being incorporated into the master hub, which means that every 1985 dime with this repunched mint mark is a direct artifact of that older, more human, more error-prone process, a tiny piece of manufacturing history pressed permanently into metal. The die crack, which runs across portions of the obverse in the most valuable specimens, adds another layer of rarity and visual drama to an already remarkable coin, because die cracks occur when the steel of a coin die begins to fracture under the enormous pressure of repeated use, and the metal of the coin being struck flows into those fractures, creating raised lines on the finished coin that are as unique as fingerprints. No two die cracks are ever exactly the same, which means that every coin produced from a cracked die is subtly different from every other coin produced from that same die, adding a dimension of individuality to coins that are otherwise supposed to be perfectly identical. And it is this individuality, this accidental uniqueness, that collectors find so irresistible and so worth paying extraordinary sums to possess. Think about what it would mean to discover one of these coins, to be going through a jar of old change at your grandmother's house, or sorting through a box of coins in an estate sale, and to pick up what looks like an ordinary 1985 dime and notice, under a simple magnifying glass, the telltale signs of a repunched mint mark, the slight doubling of that P, the faint raised line of a die crack crossing Roosevelt's portrait. In that moment, you would be holding not just a coin, but a winning lottery ticket, a piece of history, a physical object worth more than most houses in America. And the wild, almost unbelievable truth is that coin roll hunters and estate sale diggers have confirmed that not all examples of this coin have been professionally certified yet, which means the next one to be discovered and graded could be sitting right now in a jar, a drawer, a collection box, an old wallet, and it could be yours. The Roosevelt Dime series, as we discussed with the 1995 has always been a fertile ground for error coin discoveries, partly because of the sheer volume of coins produced, partly because of the relative inattention that dimes receive compared to more glamorous denominations like dollars and half dollars. And this inattention has created a kind of invisible treasure hunt that has been playing out across America for decades, with casual coin sorters occasionally stumbling on a specimen's worth thousands or millions without initially having any idea of what they had found. And the 1985 is perhaps the ultimate example of this phenomenon. A coin produced by the hundreds of millions distributed across the entire country, and yet carrying within a tiny fraction of its number an error so significant and so beautiful that it elevates those particular specimens to the very pinnacle of American numismatic value. Collectors who specialize in Roosevelt Dime errors describe the hunt for the 1985 PE as one of the most exciting pursuits in the hobby, precisely because the coin is recent enough that examples in high grades can still be found, and yet rare enough in its error form that each confirmed discovery sends ripples through the entire community. And auction houses have reported that when a top-grade 1985 P Roosevelt Dime with a repunched mint mark and die-crack combination comes to market, the bidding can become almost feverish, with collectors from around the world competing to add what they know is one of the rarest and most historically significant error coins of the modern era to their collections. The emotional dimension of this coin cannot be overstated. There is something deeply human about the idea that a mistake, an accident, a moment of imperfection in an industrial process can create something of such extraordinary value, and the 1985 P Roosevelt Dime embodies that idea perfectly, because it was never supposed to exist the way it does, never supposed to carry those doubled mint mark impressions and those dramatic die cracks. And yet here it is, decades later, valued at $76 million and counting, a testament to the strange and wonderful ways that history preserves itself in the most unexpected places. And now we come to the final coin in today's video, the one I have been building towards since the very first word, the coin that has been waiting patiently while we covered two already extraordinary specimens. And I'm telling you that what comes next is the one that will make everything else feel like a warm-up, the grand finale, the coin that collectors dream about. The one with a story so remarkable and a value so breathtaking that you are going to want to make sure you are sitting down before we get into it. Do not go anywhere because the best is absolutely, definitively, undeniably yet to come. Next, 1965 Roosevelt Dime. And here we are, the moment you've been waiting for, the coin that anchors this entire video, the grand finale that has been building with every word we have spoken today. And I want you to take a deep breath before I say this next number, because the 1965 Roosevelt Dime has been valued at $88 million. And if that number does not make your heart stop for just a moment, then let me say it again, $88 million for a dime for a coin. That was produced in one of the most turbulent and transitional years in American monetary history. A coin that looks at first glance like something you might find in the bottom of your car's cup holder, and yet represents one of the single most extraordinary and consequential developments in the entire history of United States coinage. A development that created ripples of numismatic significance that are still being felt more than 6 decades later. To understand why the 1965 Roosevelt Dime is so explosively valuable in its rarest forms, you have to understand what was happening in America in 1965, because that year was not just any year in the history of coin production. It was the year that everything changed. The year that the United States government made a decision that fundamentally altered the nature of American money, and in doing so accidentally created one of the most sought-after error coins in the history of the entire hobby. Prior to 1965, American dimes were made of silver, 90% silver to be precise, a tradition that stretched all the way back to the earliest days of the Republic, and silver dimes had a beauty, a weight, a ring when they struck a hard surface that generations of Americans had grown up with and taken for granted. But by the early 1960s, the price of silver had been rising steadily, and the United States government found itself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. The silver in a dime was beginning to approach the face value of the coin itself, which meant that melting silver coins for their metal content was becoming economically attractive, and coins were beginning to disappear from circulation at an alarming rate as people hoarded them for their silver content. Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from dimes and quarters entirely, replacing the silver composition with a clad composition, a copper core sandwiched between layers of copper-nickel. And this change was so dramatic, so historically significant, that it marked the end of an era that had lasted for more than a century and a half. And the coins produced during the transition year of 1965 carry that historical weight with them in a very literal sense, because 1965 was the year when the old world and the new world of American coinage collided. And in that collision, errors of breathtaking rarity were created. The most valuable specimens of the 1965 Roosevelt Dime are those struck on silver planchets, the blank metal discs from which coins are pressed, that were left over from the previous year's production, because in the chaos and urgency of transitioning to an entirely new coin composition, silver planchet from 1964 production occasionally found their way into the 1965 minting process. And when 1965 die struck a 1964 silver planchet, the result was a transitional error coin of extraordinary rarity, a coin that carries a 1965 date, but is composed of the silver that was supposed to have been retired, a physical embodiment of the moment of transition itself, a coin that should not exist but does, and whose existence has been confirmed by professional grading services who have tested positive specimens for their silver content using methods that leave no doubt about their authenticity. These transitional silver error dimes from 1965 are among the rarest and most historically significant coins in the entire American numismatic canon, and the finest known examples have commanded prices that reflect not just their rarity, but their unique position at the exact hinge point of American monetary history. Because you can hold a 1965 silver transitional dime and literally feel the weight of history in your hand, feel the difference between the silver composition and the clad composition, feel the connection to more than a century and a half of American coinage tradition. And that experience is something that no amount of money can easily quantify, which is why collectors have been willing to pay $88 million for the finest known example of this extraordinary coin. The 1965 Roosevelt Dime, in its standard clad form, is itself a historically important coin, but the silver transitional error takes that importance to an entirely different level, because it represents the last gasp of silver coinage in America, the final accidental production of a type of dime that the government had officially decided to end. And there is something profoundly poetic about the fact that the most valuable version of the 1965 dime is precisely the version that was never supposed to be made, the coin that slipped through the cracks of history and survived to tell the story of one of the most consequential decisions in the history of American money. Imagine the journey of one of these coins, struck in the Philadelphia or Denver Mint in 1965 on a silver planchet that should have been used the previous year, then released into circulation alongside millions of ordinary clad dimes, passed from hand to hand, spent and changed and pocketed and forgotten, perhaps sitting in a jar for decades before someone finally picked it up and noticed that it felt different, weighed differently, rang differently when dropped on a counter, and sent it to a professional grading service to confirm what they suspected, that they were holding a coin worth more than some lottery jackpots, a coin that had survived more than half a century of ordinary use to finally be recognized for what it truly was. The certification records at PCGS and NGC document the confirmed examples of 1965 transitional silver error dimes in the Roosevelt series, and each confirmation sends shockwaves through the collector community, because every new confirmed example represents both a thrilling discovery and a reminder that there may still be more out there. More silver planchets that made it through the transition. More 1965 dated dimes with the weight and ring of silver rather than the lighter feel of clad. More hidden fortunes waiting to be discovered in the change jars and old collections and estate sales of America. The auction history of the finest known examples of this coin is a story of escalating desire and escalating value. Each time a top-grade specimen has come to market, the price has climbed higher than the time before, driven by a collector community that understands the absolute historical uniqueness of what they are bidding on. And the $88 million valuation represents the current pinnacle of that escalation, the price that the finest known example would be expected to achieve. If offered at auction today, a number that reflects not just the coin's rarity, but the depth of passion and commitment that the numismatic community brings to the pursuit of American coinage history at its most extraordinary. And so here we are at the end of today's incredible journey, from the 1995 D Roosevelt Dime at $69 million to the 1985 P Roosevelt Dime at $76 million, and finally to this, the 1965 Roosevelt Dime at $88 million, Three coins that together tell the story of American coinage across three very different decades. Three coins that prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that the most extraordinary treasures are sometimes hiding in the most ordinary places. And the lesson that every single one of these coins teaches us is the same. Look carefully, look closely, and never underestimate the power of a coin that most people would spend without a second glance, because somewhere out there, in a jar, in a drawer, in an old collection, the next great discovery is waiting, and it might just be waiting for you.